The woman's body ached from being tied to the cold, harsh billboard. Her arms were pulled tightly above her head, her legs hanging, barely able to touch the ground. She was exhausted, thirsty, and hungry. Her skin felt hot from the burning sun, but no one seemed to care. The alien overseers looked down at her from their high towers, laughing as if this was some kind of game, but to the woman, it was a nightmare. She was nothing more than an object on sale, like a piece of broken furniture, discarded and unwanted. As hours passed, the crowd around the billboard grew larger. People walked by, going about their daily business. Some glanced up, their eyes briefly stopping on her, but only for a second. They saw the sign that said, "On sale," and kept moving. No one stopped to help. No one even spoke. They had all seen this kind of cruelty before. It was normal now. It was part of their lives. To the aliens, humans were nothing but tools to be used and thrown away. And to the people, the humans were no different. The woman tried to call out, but her voice was weak, barely a whisper in the wind. "Help," she tried to say, but no one seemed to hear her. She watched a family walk by, laughing as they held hands, and her heart sank. They didn't even look up. They didn't even notice her pain. It was like she was invisible, a forgotten thing, tied to that billboard with no hope of escape. Tears began to well in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She couldn't cry. Crying would show weakness. She couldn't let the aliens see her like that. But inside, a storm raged. She was angry. Angry at the people who walked by without care. Angry at the aliens who saw her as nothing more than a piece of meat to be sold. And most of all, she was angry at herself. How had it come to this? How had humanity fallen so far? But even in her anger, she knew there was nothing she could do. The aliens were too powerful. They controlled everything, from the food people ate to the air they breathed. The woman had seen it with her own eyes. There was no escape from the alien grasp. No matter where you went, they were there, watching, controlling. She had once been free, just like everyone else. But that felt like a lifetime ago. Now she was nothing, just a prisoner, tied to a billboard for the world to see. She tried to move, to shift her body, but the ropes dug deeper into her skin. She winced, pain shooting through her arms and shoulders. Her legs were sore from hanging, and her stomach growled in hunger. The woman's head was spinning. She hadn't eaten in days, and the lack of water was making her dizzy. Her body felt weak, but her mind was still sharp. She refused to give in to the exhaustion, even as it threatened to overwhelm her. Another group of people walked by, this time a group of young men. They looked up at her, but only for a second. One of them made a joke about her, laughing with his friends. They all snickered and kept walking. The woman's heart sank even lower. The world had become so numb to suffering that even something as cruel as this didn't matter. But still, she held on to a small thread of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would stop. Someone would see her. Someone would care. It was a weak hope, but it was all she had left. And as long as she had that hope, she would hold on. She would never stop fighting, even if it was just with her mind. And then, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, something changed. For the first time, a figure in the crowd didn't just walk by. This person stopped. The woman's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was someone actually looking at her? But before she could see the person clearly, the crowd moved on, and the figure was lost in the sea of faces. The woman's heart sank again. She had imagined it. No one cared. But deep inside, something stirred. A feeling that she hadn't had in a long time. It wasn't hope, not exactly. It was something stronger, something that whispered to her that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. The woman hung from the billboard, tied tightly with ropes that cut into her skin. The sun was harsh, beating down on her body, making her feel weak and thirsty. Her arms were pulled high above her head, and her legs dangled uselessly. The sign in front of her, large and bright, screamed, "On sale!" But no one seemed to care about the person behind the sign. All around her, the city buzzed with people going about their day. Some glanced up for a moment, but quickly turned away. No one dared to stop. No one dared to speak. The people in the crowd had grown used to this kind of cruelty. It was normal to see humans treated like this, to see them displayed and discarded like goods in a market. The woman, once full of life, was now just a thing, an object for sale. It hurt to think about it. She wanted to scream, to shout, but her throat felt dry. The ropes pulled tighter as she struggled, causing pain to shoot through her body. She closed her eyes for a moment, but when she opened them again, there were more people walking by without a care in the world. Some didn't even look up. They had seen this before, and it no longer shocked them. The woman was nothing but a part of the scenery, a backdrop to their busy lives. The woman bit her lip to stop herself from crying. Crying would only make things worse. It would show weakness. She couldn't let herself be weak. The aliens who had tied her up, the aliens who ruled over everything, would see it as a victory. They would be pleased to see her broken, but she couldn't let them win. Her stomach growled, and her body trembled from hunger. She hadn't eaten or had anything to drink for what felt like days. The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, but it still felt unbearably hot. She wanted to close her eyes and escape from everything, but she couldn't, not yet. She had to keep fighting, even if she was too weak to move. A small group of people walked by, laughing and talking. One of them glanced up at her, but only for a second. He looked at the sign, then turned away without a word. The others didn't even notice her. They were too busy with their lives. They didn't see her pain. They didn't see her suffering. To them, she was just another human on display, a thing to be ignored. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them that she was still alive, that she was still human, but her voice was too soft. No one would hear her. No one cared. The woman's heart sank deeper with each passing moment. She had been left here, tied to this billboard, and the world just kept moving on without her. Time seemed to stretch on, forever. The sky was turning darker, but it was still too bright. She felt like she might pass out at any moment, the pain and exhaustion pushing her to the edge. The ropes bit deeper into her skin with every movement, but she refused to give in. She refused to let them break her. Then a sound broke through the haze of pain and despair. It was quiet at first, just a slight rustling in the crowd. The woman's heart skipped a beat. Was it someone coming to help? She looked through the crowd, hoping to see someone, anyone, who might care. But the faces all blended together, and soon the noise faded away. The crowd continued moving like they always did. It was just another day, but in the silence that followed, something inside the woman stirred. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt not alone. It was a strange feeling. For the first time since she had been tied up here, she thought maybe, just maybe, someone would see her. Maybe someone would care. The thought gave her a flicker of hope, so small, yet powerful. The woman's body was weak, but her spirit wasn't finished yet. She couldn't give up. She had to keep holding on. She didn't know who would help her, or when, but deep down, she knew that someday, someone would notice her. They would see her pain, and they would make sure the aliens couldn't keep treating her like this. As the shadows grew longer and the city grew quieter, the woman hung on. She had no choice. She would keep fighting, even if it was just by holding on. And no matter how long it took, she refused to let them win, not without a fight. The woman's body felt like it was on fire. The pain from the ropes that tied her up seemed endless, and her skin was burning under the hot sun. She had been here for what felt like forever, left to suffer on display for everyone to see. And yet, no one seemed to care. The world just kept moving, people walking by without even glancing at her. The aliens in their high towers were watching, laughing. But the woman was forgotten. Her eyes began to close again, but just as the darkness started to pull her in, she heard something. It was a sound different from the usual noise of the crowd, a slight pause in the footsteps of the people walking by. For a brief moment, the woman's heart raced. Was it someone who had stopped to look at her? Or was it just another false hope? She opened her eyes, scanning the crowd for any sign of attention. Her eyes locked onto a figure. A man, standing, still. He was looking at her, really looking at her. Not the sign, not the display, just her. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The noise of the crowd faded away. The woman's heart pounded, her mind racing. Why was he looking at her? No one had looked at her like that before. He wasn't just glancing at her and moving on. He wasn't ignoring her. He was paying attention. She could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and serious. He was different from the others. But she couldn't speak, couldn't call out to him. She was too weak, too exhausted. She had barely enough strength to keep herself upright, let alone shout for help. But still, she held on to that tiny spark of hope that had flickered inside her. The man took a step forward, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the woman thought maybe, just maybe, someone cared. But then, just as quickly as he had stopped, he turned away and continued walking. The woman's heart sank. It was just another passing face, another person who saw her but couldn't be bothered to help. It hurt more than she expected. But then, something changed. The man paused again. This time, he didn't turn away. He stopped, stood there for a moment, as if he was thinking. His eyes moved around, looking at the surroundings, at the alien guards watching from above, at the people walking by. And then he started walking back towards her. His footsteps were steady, determined. The woman's pulse quickened. Was he coming to help her? Could it be possible? She could hardly believe it. No one had ever cared enough to try and help. Why would this man be different? As he got closer, the woman tried to pull herself together. She wasn't sure if she could trust this new hope, but it felt real. She knew she had to be strong now. She couldn't let herself fall apart. Not yet. The man stopped right in front of her. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while, the woman felt seen. He didn't look at her like she was an object. He didn't see her as a thing for sale. He saw her as a person, someone worthy of respect, someone who mattered. "Ah, you all right?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. The woman's throat was dry and she could barely speak, but she nodded slowly, trying to find the strength to answer. I'm not okay, she whispered, her voice weak. But thank you for looking. The man seemed to hesitate, as if he wasn't sure what to do next. The woman saw the struggle in his eyes. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't one of the aliens. He was just a man, one of the many humans who had been forced to live under the alien rule. But he was different. He wasn't afraid to look her in the eyes. He wasn't afraid to see her. "Don't worry," he said finally, his voice stronger. "I'm going to get you down." The woman's heart leapt. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Could it be possible? Could this man really be different? He quickly looked around, checking for guards, but most of the aliens were too busy watching the crowd to notice them. He moved quickly, reaching for the ropes that tied her hands to the billboard. The woman felt a surge of hope. She could feel the ropes loosening, the weight on her arms starting to lift. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her believe. She watched him work, her mind racing. This man, this human, was taking a risk. He was putting himself in danger to help her. Why? Why would he care? And yet, here he was, undoing the ropes, his movements quick and careful, as though he was fighting not just for her freedom, but for his own belief that humans still mattered. "Hang on," he whispered. Almost there. And as he worked, the woman held on to that tiny, fragile hope, because for the first time in a long time, someone had truly seen her. The woman's heart was still racing, her body weak from hours of hanging on the billboard. But something had changed. The man, the one who had seen her, was still there, helping her down from the ropes that had bound her. He had freed her from the pain, from the humiliation. But now, as she stood on shaky legs, there was a new question hanging in the air. What next? The man stepped back, his eyes scanning the area. He looked around, trying to stay calm. He knew the danger wasn't over yet. The aliens, though distracted by their own plans, could still come at any moment. He couldn't let his guard down, not now, not when he had finally made the decision to act. We need to move fast, he said quietly. The longer we stay here, the more likely they'll notice something's wrong. The woman nodded, though she wasn't sure she could move at all. Her legs felt like jelly. She wanted to run, to escape, but her body had been through too much. Still, she knew she had no choice. She had to go with him. This man had helped her, and now it was her turn to trust him. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man looked down at her, his eyes filled with determination. "I'm not sure, but I have a few ideas. First, we get out of this area. We need to blend in, stay unnoticed." The woman looked around at the busy crowd. People were still walking by, most of them too distracted by their own lives to pay attention to what was happening. It was strange, really. She had been tied up and displayed for so long, and now, as she stood free, no one seemed to notice. It almost made her feel invisible again, but she wasn't going to waste this chance. Not after everything she had been through. The man led the way, moving quickly through the crowd. The woman followed him as best as she could, her legs still shaky, but her mind racing with questions. Who was this man? Why had he helped her? Was it just a random act of kindness, or was there something more? As they moved through the crowd, the man kept looking over his shoulder, watching for any signs of danger. The woman could tell he was worried. He wasn't just worried for her, he was worried for both of them. "Stay close," he said, his voice urgent. "If we get separated, we're done." The woman nodded, determined not to let him down. She had to focus. She had to think. If she wanted to survive, she needed to be smart. She had to stay alert, watch her surroundings, and trust that this man would lead them out of this. After a few minutes of walking, they reached a narrow alleyway away from the busy streets. The man stopped and turned to face her. There was no one around. He looked her in the eyes, as though searching for something. "I've been watching the guards for a while now," he said. "There's a way out. It's risky, but it's the best chance we have." The woman took a deep breath, her mind spinning. She had no idea who this man was, or how he knew so much. But she could see the determination in his eyes. She could feel it in the air. This wasn't just a rescue. This was something more. "I trust you," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. But she had no choice. She couldn't let fear control her anymore. If she wanted to survive, she had to take the leap. He smiled, though it wasn't much of a smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I've been through too much to be scared now." "Good. Follow me," he said. The man turned and moved quickly, leading her deeper into the alley. He kept his steps light, staying as quiet as possible. The woman followed, doing her best to match his pace. Her body still ached, but her mind was sharp. She could feel the weight of their situation. Every step could be their last. As they turned another corner, they stopped in front of a large metal door. It was old and rusted, and at first glance, it seemed like it might be locked. But the man didn't hesitate. He knelt down and pulled out a small tool from his pocket. "What are you doing?" the woman asked, her voice a mix of confusion and fear. "I'm getting us out of here," he said simply. The woman watched as the man worked quickly, his fingers moving with skill. It didn't take long before she heard the soft click of the lock turning. The door creaked open slowly. The man turned to her, his expression serious. This is it. After we go through, we'll be in the lower levels. It's dangerous, but it's the only way. The woman looked at the door, then back at him. She could feel her heart racing. There was no turning back now. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Let's do it. Together, they slipped through the door, leaving behind the world of the aliens and the crowd that had ignored her. They were heading into the unknown now, but the woman knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. The door creaked shut, behind them, and for a moment, the woman stood still, her ears ringing from the sound of silence. She was no longer in the open, no longer exposed to the harsh light of the sun and the eyes of strangers. But this new place, the dark, cold hallway, in front of them felt even more dangerous. The man didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The woman followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. She was out of the open, but she still didn't feel safe. Every step felt like it might be her last. The air was thick, and there was a faint smell of rust and oil. This place was old, forgotten, just like the woman had felt for so long. The man turned to her briefly. "Stay close," he said in a low voice. "We need to get through the lower levels without being seen. If the aliens find us here, it's over." The woman nodded, gripping her hands together to stop them from shaking. She wasn't sure if she could trust this man completely, but right now, he was the only person who had shown any care for her. He had saved her from the billboard, and now he was trying to get her to safety. She had to believe in him, no matter how scary the situation was. They walked through the dimly lit hallways, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the old floor beneath them. There were no guards, no patrols in sight, but the woman knew it wouldn't be long before they were found. The aliens were always watching, always listening. The man stopped at the end of a hallway and peered around the corner. He checked both ways, making sure there were no enemies. The woman held her breath, afraid even the smallest noise would give them away. She didn't understand how this place worked, but she knew one thing. They couldn't get caught. "We'll need to move fast," the man whispered. "And quiet. There's a tunnel up ahead. It's not much, but it's our best chance." The woman swallowed hard. She didn't know what a tunnel meant, but she was starting to feel like they were running out of options. If they didn't get out soon, they'd be caught. And when they were caught, there would be no one to help them. They continued down the hallway, the woman's heart beating faster with every step. She was getting closer to something she didn't understand, but it felt like the only way out. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't want to know too much. She just wanted to get to safety. Finally, they reached a door at the end of the hall. The man quickly checked it, and then opened it with a soft push. Beyond it was a narrow, dark staircase leading down into a deeper part of the building. "This is it," he said quietly. "We go down. No turning back." The woman hesitated for a moment, looking down the stairs into the darkness. It felt like the end of the world, but she had no choice. This was their only way out. Without a word, she stepped forward and began to follow him down the stairs. The steps creaked under her weight, each one echoing in the quiet space. Her legs were still weak from being tied to the billboard for so long, but she forced herself to keep moving. As they descended, the air grew colder. The woman wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She felt like they were moving deeper into some unknown place, a place where nothing was certain. Every shadow seemed to hide danger. Every creak of the building felt like it was giving them away. But they couldn't stop. At the bottom of the stairs, they came to a small hallway that led to a door. The man stopped and looked back at the woman. "This is it," he said. "Once we go through, we'll be underground. It's a hidden area. The aliens don't usually check there. But we'll have to keep moving quickly." The woman nodded, her throat dry. She didn't want to think about what would happen if they were caught. She just needed to keep going, keep moving. They had made it this far. They couldn't turn back now. The man opened the door, and they stepped into a dark, narrow tunnel. The walls were damp, and the air smelled stale. The tunnel stretched ahead, disappearing into the darkness. The woman felt her stomach twist with nerves, but she couldn't let fear stop her. Not now. Not when freedom was so close. "Stay quiet," the man warned, "and follow me. We'll get through this." The woman stayed close behind him, her footsteps light. They moved quickly through the tunnel, the darkness swallowing them up. It felt like they had been walking for hours, the silence almost suffocating. But the man didn't stop. He kept moving forward, and she followed him without question. Suddenly, the woman heard something, a faint noise in the distance. It wasn't clear at first, but then it grew louder. It was the sound of footsteps. Someone was coming. The woman's heart skipped a beat. Had they been found? The man stopped, turning to look at her. His face was tense, his eyes scanning the tunnel. "We need to hide," he whispered urgently. The woman's pulse raced. They had come so far, but now it felt like it was all about to end. Would they make it out? Would they survive? There was no time to think. They had to move. Fast. The woman's heart was pounding in her chest as the sound of footsteps grew louder. The man looked at her, his eyes filled with worry. He quickly grabbed her arm and pulled her into a small alcove in the tunnel, pressing her back against the cold, damp wall. They stood there, holding their breath, trying to make as little noise as possible. The footsteps echoed down the tunnel, growing closer with each passing second. The woman's body tensed, every muscle on alert. She didn't know who was coming, but she knew they couldn't afford to be seen. The man had said they were underground, hidden, but they hadn't expected anyone to be down here. Not now. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away from them. The woman's stomach twisted. She could feel the weight of the silence. It was like time had frozen. She could hear her own heartbeat thumping loudly in her ears, and for a moment, she thought the person would hear it too. The man squeezed her hand, his grip tight but reassuring. He gave her a quick look, and without a word, he motioned for her to stay still. The woman nodded slightly, her body trembling with fear. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the footsteps began to move again, fading into the distance. The woman let out a slow breath, her lungs aching. It wasn't over yet, but for now, they were safe. The man waited a moment longer before moving, his eyes scanning the tunnel. He started walking again, more cautiously now. The woman followed closely behind him, her body still on edge. She couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps. Who had they been? What if they came back? The man turned a corner, and the woman followed, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to stop. They had to keep moving, keep getting farther from the city, farther from the aliens and the people who had treated her like an object. Freedom was within reach, but it was still far away. As they moved deeper into the underground, the air grew colder. The walls were now covered in moss, and the ground beneath their feet felt uneven. The woman stumbled once, but the man was quick to steady her. They didn't speak, but the tension between them was clear. They both knew how fragile their situation was. If they made a mistake now, everything they had done would be for nothing. Finally, after what seemed like hours of walking through the dark, narrow tunnels, they reached another door. The man paused, listening for any sounds on the other side. There was no noise, no movement. "We're almost there," he whispered to her, his voice filled with a strange mix of relief and caution. "But we need to be careful. This door leads to the outside, but it's heavily guarded." The woman's heart sank. Guarded? What do we do now? The man looked at her, his expression grim but determined. "We wait. We need to know when the guards change shifts. If we time it right, we can slip past them." The woman nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She was tired, both physically and emotionally, but she knew they couldn't stop now. She couldn't go back. She had to keep going. They found a small spot to hide near the door, crouching down in the shadows. The woman's mind raced as she tried to keep her focus. She thought back to the city, to the billboard, to the moment when she had thought she would never escape. But now, she was here, with this man who had shown her kindness when no one else had. It wasn't much, but it was everything. He had given her hope when she had none left. Hours passed, and the woman felt every minute. She was exhausted, her body sore from everything she had been through. But she stayed quiet, stayed still, knowing that one wrong move could ruin everything. Finally, they heard voices in the distance. The guards were coming closer. The woman's heart started to race again. She could hear the guards talking, laughing, unaware of the two people hiding just a few feet away from them. The man gave her a quick glance, his eyes sharp and focused. He motioned for her to stay low, and she did. She could hear the guards, footsteps growing louder as they approached the door. She held her breath, hoping they wouldn't hear her, hoping they wouldn't stop. When the guards passed by, the woman exhaled slowly, her whole body tense with fear. The man waited for a moment, making sure they were far enough away. Then, without a word, he moved to the door. He carefully turned the handle and pushed it open just a crack. He peered outside, checking for any guards in the area. After a moment, he nodded to her. "It's clear. Let's go." The woman took a deep breath and stepped forward, her legs unsteady. She was so close now, so close to freedom. They slipped through the door quietly, stepping into the cold night air. They were outside. The city was behind them, the walls and the alien guards no longer closing in. For the first time in what felt like forever, the woman allowed herself to smile. They had made it. They weren't free yet, but they were on the right path. Together, they had a chance. The woman stepped into the cool night air, feeling the weight of the world lift just a little. They had made it out of the underground, but they weren't safe yet. The city loomed in the distance, but they were far enough now to feel a small breath of freedom. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of hope. The man looked around, scanning the dark streets. He motioned for her to follow, his movements quick and efficient. "We need to get as far from the city as we can. The longer we stay here, the more chance they'll come looking." The woman nodded, her body aching from the long escape. She felt tired, but the thought of staying in one place too long was enough to keep her moving. She followed him down the quiet street, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Her legs were sore, but she pushed through the pain. She couldn't stop now. They walked for what seemed like hours, the silence of the night surrounding them. The city lights faded behind them, and the sounds of traffic and alien voices grew distant. The woman could feel the tension leaving her body, just a little at a time, but there was still fear in her chest. She couldn't relax yet. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. The man glanced back at her. "There's a place, a safe spot. It's not much, but it's enough to keep us hidden." The woman didn't ask any more questions. She trusted him, for now. He had saved her from the billboard, led her through the tunnels, and gotten her this far. She had no choice but to follow him. The world outside the city felt vast and unknown, but with him by her side, she felt like there was a chance. After a while, they reached a small, run-down building hidden between two larger structures. The building looked abandoned, but there was a sense of quiet safety in it. The man led her inside, and she followed, grateful for the shelter. Inside, the air was stale, but it was better than the cold night outside. The man locked the door behind them, and then turned to face her. "This will do for now," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "We can rest here for a bit, figure out what to do next." The woman sank down on the dusty floor, feeling the exhaustion hit her all at once. Her body ached, and her mind was full of questions. What would happen now? What was the next step in all of this? "I don't even know your name," she said after a long pause, her voice almost a whisper. "Who are you?" The man looked at her for a moment, his face softening. "You can call me Jace," he said. "I've been..." I've been trying to help people like you for a long time." "People like me?" she asked, confused. Jace nodded. "People who don't belong in this world. People who are caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've seen what the aliens do to humans, to anyone who's different. They treat us like nothing. But I won't stand by and watch it happen." The woman's heart skipped a beat. She had always known she was different. Her whole life, she had felt like an outsider, like she didn't fit in with the rest of the world. But hearing Jace's words made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe she wasn't just a victim. Maybe there was something more she could do. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice small. "You don't even know me." Jace shrugged, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "I don't need to know you to know what's right. You didn't deserve what they did to you. No one deserves that." The woman felt a lump in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that before. In the city, she had been nothing. She had been tied to a billboard, treated like an object. But Jace saw her as a person, as someone worth saving. "I don't know what to do now," she said, feeling lost. "I don't know where to go." Jace stood up and walked over to a small table in the corner, where a few maps and old papers were spread out. "We'll figure it out," he said, "one step at a time." He sat down at the table and began to study the maps. The woman watched him for a moment, her mind still racing. There were so many questions, so many things she didn't understand. But for the first time, she didn't feel completely hopeless. She stood up and walked over to him, her legs still weak, but she felt a sense of purpose now. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "Whatever you need, I'll do it." Jace looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You don't have to," he said, "but it's good to know you're with me." For the first time in what felt like forever, the woman felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she wasn't alone. She had Jace, and that, for now, was enough.